All right, now, obviously the big continuing story. And New Zealanders, I think, have taken an ambivalent attitude. There will be obviously those on both sides, the Friends of Israel, Palestinian Solidarity Network and those who will take strong views on this one. But perhaps reflecting that ambivalence from New Zealand to the latest in what seems intractable dispute in the Middle East, and particularly involving Israel and the Palestinians, the New Zealand government have issued, you'd have to say, relatively tepid responses, which I suspect is the result of New Zealanders being quite tepid about it as well. Overnight, Antonio Guterres, the United Nations Secretary-General, has condemned what would appear to be both sides for what he says is clear humanitarian breaches in terms of the war or the conflict that they are engaged in, Hamas and Israel. But John Minto from the Palestinian Solidarity Network says, nope, this isn't good enough. It isn't good enough that there's a transition government. New Zealand needs to be taking a much more active role in demanding a ceasefire in that particular area, and on at least letting some humanity back into the word humanitarian in terms of aid and assistance. And he joins us now. John, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on. And what have the New Zealand government done wrong, do you think, in terms of reacting to this latest conflict?
Well, I think they've done several things wrong, and all of them involve not speaking out. They did speak out against the killing of Israelis initially and condemned it, and that's right. It was a breach of the it's a war crime to kill civilians under the Fourth Geneva Convention, even during an attack on an occupying army. So they did that first step, but then they've been absolutely silent since then. They've done nothing. They've provided some humanitarian aid, but that's not what is needed at the moment. We need strong voices calling for a ceasefire so that no more civilians are killed. And we're over 2,000 Palestinian children have been killed and over 5,000 Palestinian civilians. This is slaughter on an enormous scale, and New Zealand has stood by and done absolutely nothing to stop it.
Can I just first raise with you the issue of where we're getting our facts from? Some of these facts are coming from the same people who apparently fabricated the suggestion that the Israelis had targeted a hospital in Gaza earlier on this conflict, and there's a great deal of evidence to go the other way. Do we need to be careful about our sources of information from what is a Hamas-controlled media organisation in Israel, in Gaza?
Well, I think there are lots of independent journalists on the ground. There's a whole Gaza Health Ministry, which collects this information, and there's been no suggestion in anything that I've read that says figures are being fabricated for the number of people killed. It's simply untrue.
I've seen that. I'm sorry, John. I've seen a fair bit of argument that they are being deliberately inflated by Hamas.
Oh no!
Let's agree on one thing. If we don't agree on what the figures are, we agree that there are innocent people who are being hurt, harmed, and killed.
Yeah, of course there are, and innocent people, and in huge numbers. And I'm saying that the numbers that have been released through Al Jazeera, for example, are rigorously checked, and they've got the figure now up to 2,700. But then other 2,700 children who have been killed, and we've said, well, that's obviously the minimum number. Innocent people are being killed, and they're being killed in a situation where New Zealand is refusing to speak out. Why did we Why did we condemn the Hamas attack on Israel when civilians were killed, but we're not condemning the Israeli bombardment of 2.3 million people jammed into a tiny area of land, deprived of food, water, fuel, and electricity, and then bombed like hell from the sky? That is a war crime under the Fourth Geneva Convention. It's called collective punishment, and it was brought into international law because of what the Germans did in Nazi-occupied Europe during the Second World War. They used collective punishment. If a German soldier got killed, they would line up 100 people and shoot them. to simply to terrorise and deter the local population from fighting back. That's precisely what Israel's doing at the moment. And New Zealand is being absolutely complicit in our silence.
Well, they're not to be entirely silent, are they? Because the government has taken a slightly different view, both Chris Hipkins and Christopher Luxon. They have suggested that it is perfectly okay for Israel to defend itself, and that would appear to mean attacking Gaza. And all they are concerned is that the collateral damage from that, the humanitarian needs of the Gaza and the West Bank, is maintained. But really, they have been supportive, wouldn't you say, the government, of Israel being given the opportunity to defend itself and to engage in this military conflict?
What they're ignoring is that Israel is an occupying power. So, do the Russian troops in Ukraine, for example, have the right to defend themselves? Well, under international law, they don't, because they're an occupying power. Yeah, but what about the Nazis in occupying France in the Second World War? Did they have a right to self-defense?
But Gaza isn't a country, John. John, Gaza isn't a country. It's not recognised as a country. It is nascent, I think, is the word.
Well, that's the whole point. It's a collection of refugees who are forced there.
Yeah.
When Israeli militias ethnically cleansed the whole of central and southern Palestine in 1947 to 49. So these are people who have been stuck for 75 years living under a military occupation. And, I'm saying that those people, the people of Gaza, have a right to defend themselves too, irrespective of whether they are a state or recognised as a state.
We would all agree, I think, and I think most of us, that the two-state solution is desired by almost everybody. We've tried to work towards it for the last 30, 40 years, to be a separate Palestine and a separate Israel who recognise each the right of the other to exist. We're a long, long way from that, and I can't imagine that this conflict will occur either. Do you actually, as a friend of Palestine and a strong supporter of their right to a homeland and a country, a statehood of their own, do you actually have any optimism at all that you'll see it in your lifetime, John?
We won't see a two-state solution, because Israel at every point has prevented a two-state solution from occurring. Because Israel, and we're talking about an extreme right-wing government here with at least two fascists in their cabinet, people, self-declared fascists in their cabinet, they do not want a two-state solution. They want all of the land and none of the Palestinians on it. So this was the original plan when Israel was set up back in the 1940s. This is what the Zionists wanted. They wanted to clear the land completely, and they failed to do that. And now we've got now we have a situation where they are deliberately obstructing a second state from being formed, and they've now created a situation where it's impossible for a Palestinian state to be created, because they've divided up the West Bank, which was the area set aside for a Palestinian state. It was universally agreed this area would be where a Palestinian state will be formed, and now they've turned it into Swiss cheese by building around 200 illegal Israeli settlements on that land and connecting those settlements with roads, so that, in fact, the West Bank now has 200 very small pieces of land with Palestinian villages in them. And there's no way that you can have a coherent state formed there. So what Palestinians and most of the world, apart from Western governments, most of the world are moving towards is saying, look, we need the same solution we had in South Africa, a single democratic state where everybody's rights, irrespective of religion, irrespective of ethnicity, irrespective of cultural differences, where everybody's rights are respected and are equal.